I've been doing this specific mini-series, Knockoff November, every December for 4 years now. And during that time, we've covered a lot of different topics, from copycat titles to cheap overseas animations, and even a few fan film projects. The unifying aspect among all of these have been that they are all relative obscurities made to cash in on something ultimately mainstream. But one thing we've never properly looked into is the direct opposite. When something becomes beloved and worshipped by the masses only to be accused of plagiarism somewhere down the line. And there is no stage where this is more of an issue than the stanza, as allegations of theft in music have become nearly ubiquitous with the industry itself. And while it's tempting to just sit here and list off countless examples of songs which sound similar in key places, in this video I wanted to focus more on the history of litigation itself. Not only by covering songs which are similar, but which led to actual court cases. My favorite example of theft in music, as well as being the most obvious, is probably Vanilla Ice's song Ice Ice Baby, which sampled the song Under Pressure by Queen and David Bowie without permission. Under Pressure is just one of those beautiful, once-in-a-lifetime tracks combining the talents of several artists to create the best of both of their catalogs. And Ice Ice Baby is considered one of the most laughable car crashes of the 1980s. And if you can't remember exactly how they sound different, there can be this moment of anxiety where you're not sure which song has started playing. But what's so funny about this specific case is how Vanilla Ice continued to try and insist that he hadn't stolen the song, because they were totally different.
Ding, 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 ding. That's the way theirs goes. Ours goes ding, 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 ding. That little bitty change. It's not the same.
As the Ice Master might put it, this is simply a sample of what we're going to be seeing throughout the course of this video. But before we start, I just want to say two things. First of all, I wanted to remind you guys to hit subscribe if you haven't already. We've been trying to see how many subscribers we can gain by the end of this month, and I've been setting up various stretch goals relating to different numbers, and quite embarrassingly for me, it seems like for every single one I set up, we usually hit it within a few days of me announcing them. So I thought I'd start off this video by introducing the final 2 goals of 2020. If we can hit 420,000 subscribers by the end of this month, then I will be making a review about the very strange TV show Back at the Barnyard, which is fitting because that show is on drugs. And for our very final goal, if we can hit 435,000 subscribers by December 31st, then I will be making a mini-series reviewing all of High School Musical, including the spin-offs. I figured that would be a fun thing to tease in this video since this one's all about music, so if you want to see a series of videos about High School Musical, then be sure to make sure you're subscribed by either going down to the description or clicking on that little thing that pops up on the screen sometimes. And secondly, I wanted to quickly give a big thanks to our sponsor, Raycon, for literally helping me make this video. I used my personal pair of everyday E25 earbuds while listening to potential songs for this video, and I even used it to make sure the mixing was good on the audio in the end. This year, Raycon seems to be feeling the Santa spirit because they are offering for my fanbase for a limited time 15% off of your first order. So click the link in the description or go to buyraycon.com/Quinton to save big on the shopping season this year. With that, let's go back to the beginning.
This ain't another pop song about falling in love. This is not a love song.
This is not a love song.
This is not a love song. Not a love song. I'm not gonna write you.
This is not a love song.
This is not a love song.
So when we start to talk about the history of plagiarism in music, the most logical place is to begin with that old meme, that all white music is, in fact, stolen from black artists. This is a valid take. You see, by the 1950s, black artists in America had become heavily successful in writing and releasing music, but they tended to always face the same roadblocks time and time again. You know, racism and stuff. Black artists could write, record, and release a song, but they couldn't get radios to play them, nor could they typically appear on TV shows to advertise them or really do any basic promotion. Record industry saw this as a problem, not because they cared about these black artists, but because they cared about the bona fide hits that they were putting out. And the solution found was to hire numerous white artists whose sole purpose was to cover these same songs, kids bopping the work of black artists so they could be sold into the houses of the otherwise tentative suburbia. This is likely one of those things which made cover songs so ubiquitous within these decades. It had to be part of the industry that every artist covered the songs of every other artist, or else how could this system work? But as Little Richard pointed out years later, a lot of kids still found and preferred the original versions.
And Pat Boone said, oh, wop, babaloom, bop, bop, bam, boom. And I still say, oh, wop, babaloom, bop, bop, bam, boom. And the white kids wanted to hear, wop, babaloom, bop, bop, bam, boom. Woo! They wanted to hear me. And so they were still bringing me in their house. And they didn't want their mama to know I was in the house. So they put Pat Boone on top of the bed and they put me in the drawer. But I was still in the same house.
However, in the 1960s, this all started to change in a pretty major way, and covers became far less common. The Beatles are both a great example of this, and the reason that it basically happened. You look at their early albums, and there's more cover songs than Harrison songs, but then Sgt. Pepper drops, and suddenly if you didn't write your own music, record industries didn't want to work with you. It's my opinion that this is why legal battles mainly started to appear in the mid to late 1960s. As artists became much more territorial about their work and if it was being copied by other bands. It was in the late 1960s that Led Zeppelin was first accused of musical theft, and there's a band that's been accused of so much plagiarism that if I really dived into it proper, it would probably take another 10 minutes of this already pretty long video. In my eyes, one of the most iconic legal battles at the start of this era of litigation happened in the early to mid 1970s. At this point, the Beatles had long broken up, and each member had gone their own way trying to craft original music in the rebound. George Harrison was one of those to find the earliest success, releasing All Things Must Pass in 1970, which included the song My Sweet Lord, Harrison's love ballad dedicated to God himself. My Sweet Lord immediately became one of Harrison's most iconic songs, today considered a piece of songwriting brilliance. But at the time, people also had one additional note. You see, in 1963, the Chiffons, an American group, found a musical hit with the song He's So Fine. And it seems that these two tracks have some passing similarities.
He's so fine. Wish you were mine.
My sweet Lord, my Lord.
I don't know how I'm gonna do it, but I'm gonna make it mine.
I really want to know you, really want to go with you.
You know, looking back, it's funny. When I listen to My Sweet Lord, I never think, wow, this sounds just like that Chiffon song. But when I listen to He's So Fine, all I can think is, oh my god, this sounds exactly like My Sweet Lord. All it takes to tell the similarities is to try and sing one song over the other, which is literally what caused the trouble in the first place. In 1971, country music singer Jody Miller recorded a cover of He's So Fine that included elements of the George Harrison song. And as a civil case was preparing to take place, the Chiffons themselves recorded a passive-aggressive cover of My Sweet Lord, intended to make it more clear than ever that it's basically the same as their tune.
He's so fine. My sweet Lord.
And in 1976, the case finally went to court, with Harrison appearing, guitar in hand, to try and justify why the two songs were similar. His argument was that he had based My Sweet Lord on the public domain Christian song Oh Happy Day, which is pretty clear when you listen to that song as well. But in hindsight, it probably wasn't a very good legal defense for Harrison to proclaim, "Hey, I didn't steal that song, I stole a different song." Harrison also came arm in arm with musicologists to explain how the songs being similar could be a coincidence. But the judge looking over the case, Richard Owen, was a songwriter himself, composing operas in his free time, and he did not take Harrison's defense very seriously. Harrison openly had admitted that he knew of the Chiffon song, and thus it was Owen's finding that Harrison had subconsciously imitated the song, even going as far as to say that He's So Fine and My Sweet Lord were, quote, the same song with different lyrics. Harrison would go on to accept that he had accidentally taken inspiration from this track, but continued to be bitter about the specific claim that there was no other difference between the two songs presented, which, listening back, it's easy to understand why. Now, there were a lot of similar court cases to that one in the following decade after this, but one specific song is an amazing example of how something beyond mainstream can secretly be a knockoff. In 1984, Ghostbusters was released to theaters, and of course went on to become a massive success. And to tie into the film, a music video was released of the official theme song. But this would almost immediately cause great controversy. You see, the Ghostbusters theme is phenomenally similar to I Want a New Drug, another song by Huey Lewis and the News. For some time, I grappled with the best way to illustrate exactly how similar these two songs are, and I eventually realized that this is the best way to do it. Na 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 Ghostbusters na 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 na. Same song. Decades later, the filmmakers of Ghostbusters admitted that I Want a New Drug was originally the song they used in test edits of certain scenes. And they sent these test edits to Huey Lewis, hoping he would help them make the soundtrack. Lewis said no, and they sent the same test edits to Ray Parker Jr., and the rest is history. Based on this testimony, the Ghostbusters theme is thus a commissioned sound-alike to I Want a New Drug. And this did not go unnoticed. A lawsuit soon broke out between numerous parties, but it was settled out of court with an agreement that details of the case would not be publicly discussed. However, in 2001, Huey Lewis openly discussed how he had been paid a settlement, breaking the gag order and being forced to pay a payout himself, thus meaning that we still know very little about this case or what was privately decided. Now, there's one thing that we have to get out of the way early on just for the sake of clarification with these topics, and that is Weird Al Yankovic. I know what you guys are thinking. Weird Al doesn't steal his songs, he makes parodies, so why do we need to talk about him in a video about songs that were stolen? Well, because there's a certain nuance to the discussion of Weird Al that will have a long-standing impact on the rest of the video. There's this misconception, which I even helped spread in my early videos, that Weird Al doesn't need to ask permission to make his music, and that if he didn't seek licenses or pay royalties, no one could do anything about it. For instance, when Weird Al takes the song Stand by R.E.M. and rewrites it to be about spam, that's fair use because he's changing the lyrics to be funny.
Stand in the place where you live. Now face no spam in the place where I live. Ham and pork.
But think about how subjective that really is. What if, let's say,
For the sake of argument,
I found the concept of God to be equally as funny as canned meat products? Would it thus be fair use for me to take a doo-wop song from the 1960s and rewrite it to be about God? Apparently not, as we just learned, because that didn't work out too great for George Harrison. What about the Ghostbusters theme? That song's pretty funny. He says this line at one point. Does making a ripoff funny make it totally okay in the court of the law? Well, clearly not. So what's going on here? Well, not all Weird Al songs are fair use, but they don't need to be because they're all licensed. These are the 4 tenets of fair use. This isn't the first time I've shown them, but only 2 of these are truly important for the discussion of this video. The first is the substantiality of the music taken. So for instance, sometimes when Yankovic can't get permission to parody an artist, he does style parodies, which don't sound exactly like any specific song and thus can't result in lawsuits. Dare to Be Stupid is a song by a band who sounds something like Devo, but it doesn't sound exactly like any specific Devo song. The same can be said of Traffic Jam, a vague pastiche of Prince written in response to the artist consistently refusing to let Yankovic make parodies of his work.
I'm sorry, but Prince is kind of a silly name. Do you mind if I call you Bob?
In a similar story, when Yankovic was working on his first album, he wanted to write a parody of Jack and Diane about the royal family, but was told no. So he just changed the background music to resemble a blues song, but kept many of the same joke lyrics.
Little ditty about Jack and Diane.
Gonna tell you a story about Chuck and Diane.
This is something you see on shows like Phineas and Ferb quite often. If they directly imitate a particular song, they change both the lyrics and background music. This way, no one can say that their song is serving as a replacement for the original. This is the important idea here. If you go down this route of unlicensed pastiche, you need to mock without usurping. The tenet of fair use, which can retroactively throw out everything I just explained, is if the copyrighted material is being used to criticize, review, or make commentary on the original. So, Smells Like Nirvana, Yankovic's song about how Nirvana's music is incomprehensible, would be fair use if he recorded it without permission. This is why a lot of YouTube parody artists, back when those were a thing, would write most of their songs to be attacks on the original musicians, no matter how bitter, personal, or repetitive this ended up being. I promise all of this info is going to become really important later on, just stick with me. Anyways, at this point I want to talk about another comedian musician that many of you probably haven't heard of, that being the late and very great Neil Innes. Neil Innes is one of those guys who keeps popping up in funny places if you know where to look. While in college, he joined a British comedy group called the Bonzo Dog Doodah Band and found mild success, even befriending a few of the Beatles and gaining a cameo role in the Magical Mystery Tour film. Later, he befriended many of the members of Monty Python and gained the nickname the Seventh Python, cameoing in most of their films and helping write some of their most famous tunes, from the monk chant in Holy Grail to the whistle solo in Life of Brian. While working with Eric Idle on another show, Rutland Weekend Television, Neil wrote a pastiche of early 60s love songs and suggested they film a parody of A Hard Day's Night to go along with it. Eric Idle suggested calling their fake band The Ruttles after the show's title, and Idle wrote several skits to go around it which set up some of the band's lore. Long story short, Eric Idle appeared on the American show Saturday Night Live shortly after this and aired the music video, leading to Lorne Michael commissioning an entire movie based on the skit, basically depicting an alternate reality where this band became famous instead of the Beatles. This is one of my all-time favorite niche films because it's got everything. Python cast members, George Harrison collaborating with the group, cameos by almost every SNL cast member of the time. It's really worth watching if you can get your hands on a good copy.
If you call me up at 555-2160 and say you won't hear anything but the riddles, I'm gonna come looking for you!
I'd love to talk more about this movie, but it's probably best to avoid the tangent and stick to why I'm bringing it up. You see, while Eric Idle wrote and co-directed the entire movie, Neil Innes' job was to create an entire soundtrack which both fit the tone of the film and also imitated the history of the Beatles without stealing any of the songs. To prepare for this, Innes decided to revisit absolutely nothing, relying solely on his memory of Beatles songs and how they made him feel. He thus created what is essentially an alternate universe concept album, featuring songs which sound like they could be written by the band without actually being rip-offs necessarily. When John Lennon saw the movie, his first reaction was to insist that at least one song be excluded from the soundtrack out of fear of lawsuit. That being Get Up and Go, the film's take on Get Back, which is pretty much a direct beat-by-beat clone.
Get back to where you once belonged. Get up and go, get up and go, get up and go back home.
According to Eric Idle, when George Harrison heard the album, he also foresaw a lawsuit, simply stating, Instant Karma's gonna get you. And a lawsuit did indeed come from ATV Music, who owned the rights to the Beatles catalog at that specific point in time. This is the most perplexing court case in this entire video, and according to what I can tell, it has had absolutely no precedent in the music industry. The argument of ATV Music was that because a few of the songs on the album had similarities to actual Beatle tracks, they deserved royalties for every single song, even those with no clear similarities at all. Take Cheese and Onions, arguably one of the best songs on the entire record. The visuals in the movie are clearly a parody of the Yellow Submarine, but the song itself bears no similarities to any Beatles track, and that's because it's partway in between a Neil Innes original and a pastiche of John Lennon's Imagine. The same can be said for The Good Times Roll and a few other tunes, but by virtue of sounding like they could be Beatles songs, ATV believed it was their right to be paid for each and every one. And Neil Innes eventually settled out of court, accepting a 50% royalty cut for all 14 songs on the album. And here's the funny part. Alongside this, they also insisted that all releases credit these songs as being written not by Neil Innes, but by Lennon-McCartney Innes. That's kinda cool, right? Imagine being so good at writing songs that your music is retroactively given the Lennon-McCartney label, despite not sounding like any Lennon-McCartney songs? After this, Eric Idle suggested Neil get back at ATV by releasing a compilation album titled The Best of Lennon-McCartney Innes, but it's clear Neil just wanted the matter to be done and over with. But believe it or not, the reason I want to talk about Neil Innes is not because of the Rutles. Because at one other point in his life, he managed to find himself on the other end of the litigation station. You see, in 1973, Innes had released How Sweet to Be an Idiot, a solo album which featured the song of the same name, his dedication to the joy of stupidity.
How sweet to be an idiot.
This would hardly be a chart topper, but it would go on to be one of the favorite songs of the cast of Monty Python, who would often have Neil play the song during live performances like the Hollywood Bowl, which are well known among Python fans.
How sweet to be an idiot.
But after this, the song faded into obscurity and was rarely heard about until 1994, when Oasis casually released their new hit single, Whatever.
I'm free to be whatever I. How sweet to be an idiot. I'm free to say whatever I
I wrote a song called How Sweet to Be an Idiot, which goes... How sweet to be an idiot. And that sounds a bit like, I'm free to be whatever I... And somebody pointed out to him, and so they settled out of court for something like 25%, which I share with EMI.
Neil Innes passed away in December 2019, and since I looked up to him so much when I was young, I guess this part of the video was just an excuse to talk about him. He always seemed like such a nice man, and it's been really sad thinking about how he isn't around anymore. But this is a really good chance to transition into another topic, and one which many of you know much more well. In 2013, Robin Thicke and Pharrell Williams released Blurred Lines, a song that no one likes and I don't need to criticize because it's mostly associated with the criticisms that everyone has made of it. For the sake of this video, all you need to know about Blurred Lines is that it's slightly inspired by the work of the late Marvin Gaye. Specifically, the song Got to Give It Up. And sometime after its release, the Gaye estate decided that they were owed substantial royalties and exclusive rights, insisting that the two songs were one and the same. Let's take a listen. It's undeniable that there's a similarity there that's a little more than a coincidence. It's almost like, you could say, that both songs are in the same genre. After this similarity was noted, a bitter copyright dispute broke out between the Gay estate and Bridgeport Music, which ultimately ended with the writers being found guilty of copyright infringement, and Marvin Gaye receiving posthumous writing credits and royalties. This was incredibly controversial, not only among fans of the song, but other musical artists who loudly called this a poorly judged case which could have repercussions in the industry for decades. The Gaye family didn't have specific notes to compare, there's not really a part of one song that sounds like the other, but according to them it was the feel and the sound which were stolen, phrases which were extremely vague to say the least. Even people who hated the song and disliked Robin Thicke generally agreed that they weren't the same song. They just both had a groove and a little cowbell and sounded like they could be from the same era. But despite this, Farrell and Robin Thicke were forced to pay upwards of $7 million over the case. And they essentially lost the ownership of one of the best-selling singles of all time. But this isn't why I want to talk about this case, because this song isn't stolen, but I know one that was. You see, around this time there was a comedy group gaining steam called the Axis of Awesome. You most likely know them from their viral hit, 4 Chords. However, my favorite song that they've ever done was featured on their 2016 album Viva la Vida Loca Las Vegas, and was titled Got to Rip It Off. The thesis statement of the song was this: they were going to steal from the exact same song that Blurred Lines was accused of. But they weren't going to borrow a feel or a sound or a couple dings of a cowbell, no. They were going to copy every single note, and they were going to get away with it because it's entirely legal.
Parody is fair use, baby, so just copy it all. Use your music, ooh, Marvin, and that's alright. It's perfectly legal. Fuck your copyright.
And that's the brilliant part, because they're criticizing the estate of Marvin Gaye. They're using copyrighted media to criticize said media, a basic tenet of fair use. And what's funnier about this song is that it sounds nothing like Blurred Lines at all. And as this tune points out,
I think it's ironic they paid homage to you, and they're the ones that you took to court, but it's us you can't sue.
this is probably one of the most meta inside songs I've ever heard, and one of the only examples of someone stealing a song for the sake of proving a point and totally getting away with it. And it's a perfect mockery of the very court cases we've spent this video dissecting, and the perfect place to wrap up this video. As a quick reminder, be sure to go to buyraycon.com/Quinton now to get your hands on a pair of quality wireless earbuds with 15% off. I've been using these everyday E25 earbuds daily for what feels like ages now, and I continue to stay impressed with the joy I get out of using them every day. Raycon isolates you in your own little bubble, helping you enjoy whatever you're listening to without bothering those around you. The batteries in each pair last for 6 hours, have Bluetooth compatibility, and they're so easy to charge. I usually use them to listen to music in the morning, then charge them at night when I go to bed. It's the perfect system. And now is the best chance to get you or your loved ones a pair of these earbuds, and at a reduced price. But only if you go to buyraycon.com/Quinton. Once again, that's buyraycon.com/QUINTON. I promise that this is a gift that keeps on giving and is perfect for the season. Thanks for watching this one. It's been a really rough year, but you guys have made 2020 so rewarding, and I've personally had a great time, and it's only because of you guys. I have a lot of plans for videos I want to get out this December, but I'll admit I've realized this week I've been spreading myself really thin, so I don't know what I'm going to be able to actually get done. But I hope it all pays off, because it is hard. But if you guys want to help out, just make sure you're subscribed. That's all it takes. I really want us to get to these final two goals, 420 and 435. And all you guys have to do to help us get there is go down and make sure you're subscribed. It takes a second, and it means so much. And, leave a comment as well. I've been reading those comments. There's been such a breath of positivity these last few months, and it's really made this haul an amazing season. Really made me feel motivated to work on videos. So thank you guys all, and I guess all I can say is here, there's going to be some more videos on your screen. Be sure to check out some of my other stuff. Of course, the subscribe button is right there. With that, I've been Quinton Reviews, and that's all you need.